Managing Director of the Global Maritime Forum. I am pleased to welcome you to this session of the virtual high-level meeting on building a more resilient maritime logistics chain. Welcome also to those of you who are joining us via the live stream. This is the first of 3 learning sessions taking place today. The objective of these sessions is to share knowledge about key topics of concern and to inform discussions that are taking place in working groups that many of you are also taking part in. Much could be said about the topic of today's session, but rather than do so myself, I would much rather introduce our moderator of this session, Christine Lowe, who joins us from Hong Kong. Christine won't remember this, but I actually first met her when she was chief executive of Civic Exchange, the nonprofit think tank she founded. And in that capacity, she was participating in the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos, where at the time I was working. Since then, she's gone on to found several other nonprofit organizations in Hong Kong related to the environment, to equal opportunity, to arts and culture, and to human rights. She was Undersecretary of the Environment in the Hong Kong government from 2012 to 2017, and has also been a member of the Legislative Council of the Hong Kong government. Today, Christine is Chief Development Strategist at the Institute of the Environment at Hong Kong Institute of Science and Technology, and she teaches at UCLA. Moreover, she serves as a board member of the Robert Ho Family Foundation at CDP and is a member of BASF's Stakeholder Advisory Council. She is also a member of the Global Maritime Forum's Board of Directors, and that's such a great pleasure and honor for us. In other words, we could not be in better hands for this particular session. Christine, over to you.
Good day, everyone. I have the privilege of moderating this panel, but before I start, I want to just make sure where we are. We're trying to put everybody on the same page. So what you're going to see now is we're going to do a Zoom poll. You will be asked 2 questions. You're going to all have a minute to get into it. So I think you're going to see the questions now. May I ask you to fill them in as soon as possible? Then we will be able to see what you think, and we will reflect back your answer to everybody immediately. As you know, the Global Maritime Forum, we're very fortunate to have a great group of supporters who are working behind the scene to help us here. How are we doing? Are we all answering the questions? Okay, whilst you are continuing to answer the question, I want to make sure that we frame our discussion today. I mean, obviously today is impossible to talk about anything without touching on COVID. And what COVID-19 has done is that it's put us all in a big shock, whichever industry or sector of business you're in. And this is the same for the maritime sector. So the purpose of our discussion today is a reflection on what are the weaknesses and problems that have been thrown up by COVID-19. The purpose for having this discussion is to understand how wide these issues are, looking from different perspectives, and also for us to have a chance to start talking about how we could build resilience into our various systems, because it is very likely that we will have other shocks, and perhaps in the future, we will have other infectious diseases. But of course, as we speak, COVID is not over yet, so that we're all still having to deal with what it is, the impact that it is having. So are we ready to have some response from our team?
Christine, it looks like the poll results are in. They might not be popping up on your screen, but we've had 78% of participants say we're still in the middle and hard to say if we're through, and a nearly 50-50 split between open to digitalization but wary of recent cyber attacks in the maritime industry, and 50% at investing heavily in digitalization and the required protection measures. So people are on the front foot, it seems.
Okay, well, I guess that's not unexpected for us. So this afternoon, I'm privileged to have three panelists who represent different parts of the maritime industry to kick off our discussion. The first speaker I will invite is Isabelle Durant. She's the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, usually called UNCTAD. After Isabelle, we're going to have Ms. Quah Hoon, who's the Chief Executive of the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore. And some of you have met her last year when we were all in Singapore. They will be followed by Hugo de Stoop, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Euronav, and he will share with us the plight of seafarers, especially during this time of COVID. So what I'd like to do is to hand over to Isabelle straight away. Isabelle, please.
Thank you, Christine. I hope you are hearing me. It's okay?
Yes, thank you.
So first of all, good morning or good afternoon for all of you. And you presented UNCTAD, the UN Conference on Trade and Development, and we have been a long-term advocate of the importance of maritime transport for a development perspective. Our trade logistic team is providing data, analysis, policy, reviews, but also training for port manager, as well as foresight for both present and the future challenge with the SDGs as a compass. But you are for us an important compass too, in order to understand the constraints, the realities of your companies and ports, and we will hear from Singapore in a few minutes. So sharing and crossing this experience, we try to provide to all stakeholders in this field the knowledge to allow them to define strategies, adopt policies, and invest effectively. That was just to present my organization and what we are doing in this regard. So you have been, of course, severely affected, and you are, as the survey show, you are in the middle of the crisis and not at the end of the crisis. So, but you have also been key partners to successfully ensure that trade continued to flow and provide access to goods, to equipment, etc., etc. And therefore, I would like really express my appreciation also to the members of this forum. So some data, first of all, just in order to set the scene. UNCTAD data shows that shipping activities have rebounded in the third quarter of 2020. This offers a hopeful sign for the world merchandise trade, which suffered an historic year-on-year fall of 27% in the second quarter, according to the UNCTAD estimators. In line with this decline, by mid-June, more or less, the average number of container vessels arriving weekly at ports worldwide had sunk by 8.5% year-on-year. And by early August, this gap had declined to just 3%. And as of today, the indications are that we are back to levels similar to 1 year ago. That's just the biggest figures worldwide. An important issue that you show in your survey is digitalization as a key component of maritime development. And I've seen that more or less 50% of the audience are doing efforts in order to jump in digitalization. And that's an important response to the pandemic because, of course, if they did it by default, they know they have to do it by design, by choice. And stakeholders who in the past may have been reluctant to embrace digital documents and electronic payments now realized that physical contact and paper documents need to be replaced as much as possible. And so we are pleased really to see that many of our UNCTAD programs have shown to be particularly useful in helping advancing reforms and does also help build resilience in global supply chain. For instance, our programs such as SICUDA, custom automation, trade information portals, single windows, e-commerce assessment, transit cargo tracking, and in general, digitalization and dematerialization are in high demand in every country. Practically, all the concrete solutions that we are proposing, from electronic document over risk management to automation, in practice achieve facilitating maritime trade and transport and the protection of health, and we can do both. Acceleration in e-commerce is also influencing container shipping, at least temporarily. Items ordered online by Western consumers from Asian vendors are typically flown in the belly of planes, a far quicker method than by sea. But the grounding of most of the global airlines fleets means the e-commerce sector has now to ship more items. However, this trend is probably not sustainable on long term. The other big challenge that we will discuss today is, of course, decarbonization in shipping. And COVID-19 pandemic has shown how important a resilient maritime supply chain is for trade, but has brutally reminded us of the vulnerabilities of the global trading system, and also of the need to listen to science to prepare for future challenges. The major challenge for resilient maritime supply chain of the future is climate change. There is no doubt of the need to mitigate and adapt to higher temperature, more volatile weather patterns, and rising sea levels. We are pleased to see that shipping has set itself clear goals in the endeavor to reduce greenhouse gas emission from maritime transport. UNCTAD collaborates very closely with the International Maritime Organization in the assessment of the potential impact of measures that aim at reducing carbon emission from shipping. Just this week, UNCTAD participated in an important IMO working group where short-term measures towards the decarbonization of shipping were discussed. We highlighted the importance to undertake comprehensive impact assessment of the proposed measure, while also stressing our view that further efforts to undertake impact assessment should not delay the important effort to achieve the goals. Developing countries are probably the countries who need more support, especially the small island developing states and least developed countries. They need support. The same countries that are most affected by climate change are also potentially the countries most negatively affected by higher transport costs or lower maritime connectivity. UNCTAD data shows that small island developing states pay on average twice as much for the transport of their foreign trade than the world average. They are also confronted with remoteness and lower air and maritime transport connectivity, which affect the resilience and reliability of their trades. So it's really important that the new regulation that affect shipping's cost and service patterns carefully take into account the needs of the most vulnerable economies. Finally, we see some opportunities for developing countries. And our experience on the ground shows that the push for digitalization and the further optimization of processes can help promote reforms in ports, custom, and maritime administration. If, as we all hope, there is a post-COVID development, it's not the case today, but we hope as soon as possible, we need to look in progress made during lockdown. In regard to the energy transition, here too, there could be potential for developing countries as generators, provider, or distribution center in order to adapt how goods are distributed. A study by the Global McKinsey Institute found that companies could shift a quarter of their global product sourcings to new countries in the next 5 years. That's also something that we have to have in mind. In manufacturing sectors and/or to a certain extent, a relocalization of production could mean more vessels stopping at ports within, for instance, a broader Asian region and no longer concentrated in China. So it's important for the smaller regional ports. Often they doesn't have adequate infrastructure for huge ships. Alternative fuels is also a key question, and investment needed to fuel the energy transition will be ashore, including in ports and hinterlands. So we are in a period with a lot of uncertainties, but the dynamism of the sector, and I've seen that also last year when I was in Singapore with you, the dynamism of the sector has to help to reap the benefits from such opportunities, And in this regard, I'm totally sure that public-private partnership can be an important instrument, and we at UNCTAD look really forward to collaborating with government and the private sector in these endeavors. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabelle. Let me go straight on to Hoon, who will give us a view from the perspective of a major port operator. Hoon, over to you.
Thank you, Christine, for the introduction, and GMF for the opportunity to share my thoughts on this topic. 2020 has been a challenging year, no less because of COVID-19, and I share Isabelle's observation that the maritime remains resilient, and we've seen figures rebounding in the third quarter. However, it also presents an opportunity for us to transform the maritime industry to face this new normal, and there is a need for a new playbook for resilience. So the question is, how do we do this? Isabelle has shared a few areas. I would like to share my views in 3 key areas, and as well take the opportunity to share some of the initiatives that Singapore has kickstarted. The 3 areas of digitalization, talent, and sustainability. First, digitalization. How do we harness the full force of technology? Now, as COVID-19 has significantly accelerated the push for digital transformation, going digital builds resilience by ensuring that business can continue and companies can continue to remain engaged with their stakeholders. So in Singapore, this July, we co-created the Maritime Digitalisation Playbook together with Infocom Media Development Authority, IMDA, and the Singapore Shipping Association to support maritime companies, especially SMEs, in their digital transformation journey. We are also collaborating with DBS Bank to digitalize as much as possible payment transactions in the industry. Now, at the global level, going digital also presents opportunities for the industry as a whole to become more transparent, efficient, and connected. So there is a need for interoperability and standard setting at an international level so that various digital systems can link up and communicate effectively with each other to ensure the seamless flow of goods and information across borders. So to this end, Singapore has signed an MOU with 5 international partners, including the Port of Rotterdam, PSAI, TradeLens, GETF, and Cargo Smart, to develop common data standards and API specifications for maritime transactions. Now, we are also taking one step further with our Digital Oceans initiative to create a global interoperable network of ships, ports, governments, and other trade platforms. Now, however, as more and more of our operations move online, we must also pay greater attention into the issue of cybersecurity. So just yesterday, the IMO and MPA, we co-organized a Future of Shipping webinar on digitalization, and together with 9 other authorities around the world, we launched the Port Authority's CIO Cybersecurity Network, PACnet in short. This will allow us to strengthen collaboration and information sharing on cyber resilience among port authorities around the world. Let me now go to the second area, talent. How do we further invest in our people? Now, the maritime sector is on the cusp of a transformation, and it's actually very exciting. We are already global, and now we are going tech. Now we are also going green. And it's a very good opportunity to attract talent into our sector. The speed of disruption has never been faster, and the maritime industry has still remained resilient against all odds. So we should actually really tap on this window of opportunity created by COVID-19 to attract as much fresh talent as we can. It is time to make maritime your port of call. That's our slogan. So to this end, we are coming together with our industry associations, tertiary institutions, maritime companies to provide traineeships and attachment opportunities because we want to attract new talent to the sector, give them opportunity to appreciate the importance and the complexity of the work in this sector. There are many exciting areas as well, new areas, cybersecurity, data analytics, sustainability, green growth, and we will have to grow our maritime workforce to be ready for this new normal. The third area, embracing sustainability. So in this context of the maritime industry, the decarbonization of shipping is an issue we must not lose sight even during this time. We recently also co-hosted a webinar on decarbonization and the future of shipping with IMO, and we are actively supporting IMO's Next Gen initiative. It is an initiative, a platform which allows all of us to share our views and our thoughts, allow new ideas to snowball because we need a commercial feasible solution for ships soon to meet the IMO 2030 and 2050 target. And just this week, we also hosted our first ever Singapore International Bunkering Conference, SIPCon 2020, where we announced partnership with the Port of Rotterdam and Japan's MLIT to drive R&D and pilot trials into future fuels so that ports can be ready when the ship is ready. Such efforts will allow us to bring us closer to meeting IMO's 2030 and 2050 decarbonization targets. So to summarize, I think we can build resilience through technology, our people, and sustainability. It definitely requires fresh thinking about how the industry has approached issues in the past. And I appreciate this effort to bring all of us together to share, having this platform to share our views. So I look forward to our discussion later. Thank you so much, Christine.
Hoon, thank you for a very succinct presentation on 3 very important points. So just before we move to Hugo, I'd just like to say that for the audience, you are able to ask questions, and we will have a round for participants to raise questions, and you can start putting questions on the chat box already. So Hugo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Christine. I hope you can hear me and see me. I'm going to talk a little bit about what COVID and the travel restrictions have meant from an operator perspective. I'm the CEO of a fairly large tanker company. We own 76 vessels, and on each vessel there are 25 people on board who are supposed to be rotated every 3 to 6 months. So they sign a contract for 3 months or 4 months or up to 6 months. It's a little bit their choosing, and then they are able to rotate whenever we reach the port around those dates. The travel restrictions, unfortunately, have meant that people have been stranded on board. In other words, they've been hostage of the situation. They were not permitted to disembark because people fear that the travel would carry the virus further, which is a little bit ridiculous from the perspective of having spent 6 months on board and obviously have not seen anyone who could infect them. So that's already very sad that people did not understand the very first basic point. In total, there is about 2 million seafarers, and it is said that about 400,000 have been stranded at some point in time during the crisis, and the crisis is not over. So I'm afraid the number will go up. Now, what people need to realize is that behind the number, there is something which is called humans, which is called individuals. Those people have personal life. Some of them, and it was definitely the case at Euronav, seafarer or personnel, had planned their contract because they want to be home for a specific family event. They want to be next to their close ones. They wanted to see the birth of a child. And very often that was prevented. Now, don't get me wrong. The shipping people are extremely resilient. We talked about resilience in terms of the logistics around the world, and that's very important. Here I'm talking about human beings' resilience. Those people are extremely resilient, like I've almost never seen elsewhere in any other industry. But what we need to realize is that we were not able to tell them, okay, you have to work a little bit longer, but by this month or that date, we will be able to rotate you and disembark you. That was not possible. So basically, we were telling people, be patient, stay on board. We have no clue when we're going to be able to disembark you and rotate you so that you can rejoin your loved ones. And that is a severe problem, because then you are affecting the mental health of the people. They get desperate. If you have no date in sight, you get desperate because you believe that you're going to be stranded forever. And that is a very delicate situation that we have tried to manage to the best, with the best of our capacity at Euronav. And I'm sure that other companies have done the same. But believe me, this will leave scars. Now, the solution was relatively simple, because people have to know that pretty much every seafarer carries a seaman book, which is a kind of a passport, which enables them to travel around the world from the port where they have to embark or disembark back home or from home. And that usually means that they don't have to ask for a visa, because the purpose is only to get to their job. So for us, it would have been very easy, at least we thought it was easy, to give those people the status of key worker. And the key workers during the crisis, and that was the case in other sectors, continue to travel and were able to travel. No, that was not the case here. And it seems that it would have been a very easy solution. I'm still very hopeful that it can be an easy solution for the future, but it wasn't done like that. And so we have had this humanitarian crisis that we have seen so far and which is continuing. Now, it's all good and well to say, okay, we had a solution, we couldn't implement it. It's probably the fault of the politicians who didn't play balls with us, who didn't listen to us. But maybe we need to reflect and understand, why is that the case? And in fact, it is a fact that the maritime industry can probably blame itself for that. And that is simply because we've always tried to be untransparent, to hide behind the systems, to be as unregulated as possible, to pay as little tax as possible. So very few companies are incorporated in OECD countries, or for that matter, in other main jurisdictions. A lot of the ships are registered in small jurisdictions, and that's because the regulatory framework is very low, and of course the tax are almost inexistent. And I think that this crisis is revealing something, and that thing is the world has globalized, and the world has become transparent. And I think that shipping industry in general must become more transparent, must be recognized by the world for what it does. And what it does is we enable global growth. We enable globalization in general. We're transporting more than 90% of the goods. And I think that when you think about it, if you stop shipping, you stop the world. It's as simple as that. And so it is time that we recognize the people who are working on board the ship, who are already making a lot of sacrifice, because believe me, being away from home for anywhere between 3 to 6 months is very difficult in normal circumstances. And it is, of course, even more difficult in the current circumstances. That is the end of my introductory remarks. Thank you.
Terrific. Hugo, thank you so much again for your great succinctness. Perhaps we can start this part of our Q&A, which is just between the four of us, before we open up. But I am looking at people's questions, so I might pick questions and put it to you as well. So maybe we can start with the issue where Hugo left off about seafarers. Because in the port of Hong Kong, we did allow ships to come and change crew, but it became a little bit of a problem because we also found that the new crew that were coming from their home countries, some of them may have been affected, and I think some of them were with COVID. And it seemed like that whilst we had good management of the people who were already here, at one stage, we didn't plug the hole of the seafarers and also the airline pilots that were coming in when they were changing crew. So I'm just wondering that we talked about what are some of the procedures we need. Hugo, you talked about the lack of maybe transparency or networking or the connectedness of the trade. I mean, we certainly don't want the maritime trade to have a negative a kind of negative brand to politicians and to governments. So I wonder, as we go forward, because we still need to get the 300,000-400,000 people to be able to move on and off ships as smoothly as possible, are there any immediate measures that we could take or we could call for? Anyone, please.
Well, I think that I mean, if we can speak for ourselves, we have had a certain degree of success to rotate on and off people. So at the peak in July, we had 633 people were over the contract, and we're down to 341, which is half the number. Okay, fair enough, out of a little bit over 3,000 seafarers, but we still have a problem with those 300 people. And what we have seen is that some jurisdictions have organized themselves in a way that allows this rotation. And that means that People have to pass a test that they don't have COVID, a little bit like if I have to go, I went to our office in Greece, I live in Belgium, and I had to pass a test, and that was not a problem. I showed that I was negative, and I could embark in an airplane and land very safely and not put anyone at risk. So I think that is a very simple step. And the second step is to attach those certificates and probably talk about digitalization, but unfortunately that cannot be organized overnight. But making sure that all those documents are digital, so that you cannot fake them, and they are secure and people can trust those documents. But that's probably for the long-term future. But in this instance, I would say let's pass a test, and let people travel freely to wherever they need to go in order to embark or disembark from a ship. Again, it's only 50% because disembarking from a ship means that you don't have COVID.
Right. Lei Hoon, maybe the Singapore experience would be useful.
Yeah, if I could share from a port authority's perspective, in fact, in Singapore, we have been facilitating crew change. In fact, I think in the past 1 month, we are almost doing a few hundred per day, sign on and sign off. As what Hugo mentioned, I think it's a fine balance between public health risk and also facilitating crew change, right? So Hong Kong actually at one point was facilitating crew change, Singapore as well. But what we thought was key to ensuring successful crew change is to ensure that there is a safe corridor. So maybe to build on what Hugo mentioned, we have a crew change procedure, right? That in fact, it's not just to protect a local community, it's also protect the seafarers themselves. That we have actually created a bubble, a travel bubble. So first, in your own country, where before you leave the country, like what Hugo mentioned, we ask for them to be quarantined 14 days, and then you provide a COVID negative cert, as well as safe to fit to travel. Then you fly into Singapore, we bubble wrap you. We actually bring you to what we have set up as a crew facilitation center. In there, we will hold you there in the holding facilities until your ship comes, up to 48 hours and recently 72 hours. So this has allowed actually quite a few hundred of them to be able to do this crew change on a daily basis. And it helps to assure both the ship owners as well as the port authorities and the country as well. We'll continue to have to refine the crew change procedure depending on the health risks that emerge here and there. But by and large, I think for the past 1-2 months, or we've been facilitating since March anyway, but for the past 1-2 months, we've been stepping up such crew change. And we think that this protocol is actually very useful. It's a crew change guideline which we have put online. Singapore Shipping Association has also shared it. We have shared it at IMO among the various port authorities, which other authorities can also facilitate. Now, what we did again 1 month ago was that we realized that we also should also go upstream, right, and help and see what we can render as support to the crew faring countries. So we have set up this SG Star Fund together with ITF, ICF. The key is actually to go upstream to see whether we can also work with them on safe quarantine and safe testing facilities, such that countries where the seafarers go to do crew change are assured, that the processes are being well taken already, and that when the crew comes and do the crew change, it is really very safe. So these are some of the measures we have put in place. I think some ports already around the world are slowly opening up as well. I'm quite optimistic about it. And I say that even for Singapore registered ship, for example, almost all, more than 90% already have all the crew that have expired have done their sign-offs already. So we will have to continue to work on that. The other area I wanted to add for seafarers is it's actually a very good time for us to do innovative ways through technology. So, for example, telemedicine consultation is one that we have put in place because it allows some direct contact. You don't have to bring the doctors up to the ship, and you can actually call and you can get all the advice that you need. It's also good for the mental health of the seafarers. So there are some of the areas which we are looking at to improve the mental health of our seafarers.
Right. That's terrific. So perhaps we can move on to the issue of digitalization, because, listening to Lei Hoon earlier on, obviously the port authority, the government of, where a particular port is, working together with industry is so important, particularly to help the smaller companies get on board with digitalization. So I'm just wondering here, maybe Isabelle, you might have some perspective here, and then I'm sure Lei Hoon, you have more that you can say, and as well as Hugo. Isabelle, please unmute.
Yes, thank you, Christine. Yes, digitalization, and you realize, and especially the companies which didn't do enough in this regard in the past are realizing now how important it is. So just I mentioned that in my introductory remark. But I would like to insist on what my compatriot Hugo said about the crisis is revealing a lot of things. And it's revealing in the seafarers what is happening and the need for more transparency, with, of course, a lot of problems which are on human level absolutely severe. Nevertheless, I think that it's important to seize the opportunity to do something differently on very short term, not only on the long term with targets for 2050. Of course, we have to have, but shortly we can do something very closely. And I think that, for instance, in digitalization, all the aspect of single windows, tracing, all those aspects related to what we are using as Cuda, it's a custom support software. All those issues could really be adapted soon and helping the companies so well. Of course, and especially for the smallest one, it's difficult because they are not familiar with that, and probably the sector didn't do enough in this regard in the past. But I think that, frankly, it's really important, and we are there with our support to really show, and especially to share the different experience where a company, even a small company, started with that and can show how it changed the life or the reality or even the functioning of the company. Yes, it is really, really helpful. So I think that, yes, really how we can really change and adapt or move based on the exacerbation of the weaknesses or the strength, because we know that the sector did a lot in order to be resilient, and I say that, and it's good, and the rebound for 2020 is there. Nevertheless, it's temporary, so to keep that sustainable, it really requires a big effort in this regard, and digitalization is really, really an important tool to do better. Social distancing means that very well. We cannot have, and probably for, I don't know how many times, but close relationship. And so it's why digitalization helps us, and especially for relationships which are not really social. It's really useful and technical relationship. It's better to do that through digital ways.
Right. Well, what I'm seeing from speaking to people who are in the manufacturing sector is that even small companies, if they didn't get on the digital train, they can't actually do anything, because meetings and the old way of handling documents is just not available. So in a way, I'm just wondering, from Lei Hoon's point of view, you know, when you're dealing with the small companies in Asia, they are having to get on board, right? I mean, this is just forcing the pace of digitalization.
Yeah, Christine, I mean, definitely, because in a way, but I would say that actually COVID has accelerated the digitalization efforts. You have no choice, you have to come on board. So, I mean, the reason why we came out with the Maritime Digitalization Playbook, it really is to set some sort of like guidelines to encourage SMEs to come on board. But actually what I would like to add on is on this digitalization effort is that you actually need to look across the whole logistics value chain. It's not just shipping alone, right? So we need to link up with banks, the logistics player, to see how you can actually get the cargo to flow in a more coherent manner, and that there are not many, there cannot be different standards, different submissions, which actually makes the whole paper submission exercise very laborious. The second thing I would add is that it has to be an inclusive exercise and not an exclusive exercise. Currently, you have different platforms being set up, and different platforms use your own data and have your own sets of submission. The key question is, can we actually get all these systems to interoperate with one another? So we layer the physical connectivity with digital connectivity, which allows the cargo to be tagged and go smoothly from one system to another without having to resubmit from one port authority to another. So that's a vision, that's an ambition we have, which is why we have signed a couple of MOUs to try to accelerate that. It will take time. In IMO as well, we are also having discussion in terms of what are some of the data sets we can harmonize. And hopefully we are on the right track. Question is, can we accelerate that? Because of COVID, it has shown us we need to do more than that. Yeah.
Maybe just a question here for Lei Hoon. since you and Singapore is already pushing so hard to get some of these things done, going forward from today, what do you think is the most effective way of kind of bringing all those players together?
I would say the key is to get a few key players together so that we can set the benchmark, and then you invite others to join in. So that is on the data side, harmonization side. On the SME side, you definitely need to give them support, whether it's mentorship, whether it is financial support to buy the equipment, or whether it is about, for example, some of the skills that they need training and all this. So it has to be an ecosystem of support. You cannot be saying that, oh, SME, I need you to digitalize, and then that's it, you leave it to them on their own. With that, which is why we link up with Singapore Shipping Association, we link up with our Infocom Development Authority, and together, we roll out a package to our SMEs to try to level up and take up the digital solutions. With the banks, actually, is a key factor here, the banks, because digital payment, e-signature, can this be trusted? Can this document be trusted? So that is actually another key point which we need to try to resolve. Yeah.
Right. So apart from the Port Authority, how important are governments and international institutions to work through with the financial aspects of digitalization? Isabelle, do you have a view on that?
Yes, we of course we are an international organization. We are not the government. The government are our boss, and they are deciding and giving us a mandate to work, namely in the shipping sector. But it's true that we are trying to organize something which is useful. For instance, I give you an example which is a bit different. We organize for the SMEs a platform called Etrade for All. Etrade for All is a platform organized by the UN with the private sector, with the biggest organization related to digitalization, ITU on connection, UNCTAD for e-commerce for development, ITC working with SMEs, etc. And this platform is really a place, a horizontal place, and not the lesson given by the Geneva people. It's ridiculous. We are not teachers, and we are not able, you are knowing the things very better than us. It's why organizing and supporting this platform in order to give to the smallest, but also to the biggest one, and with very good sharing information, last information, of course, financial support, access to financing regarding digitalization equipment, because of course there is a cost for that. We are also working on business facilitation for the SMEs, helping them with the software. The Asikuda that I spoke about is really a software which is not a software from the private sector with all the problem when you contract with the private sector and the upgrading regularly, cost with cost as cost as cost. In this case, it's really a common good. And doing that, I hope that we are helping the sector to accelerate the digital process, especially for the smalls in the developing countries, which are, of course, less equipped or less prepared to jump in it, just also because the connectivity is not good. That's the minimum level that you need in order to organize the digitalization, is have access to connection. And sometimes connectivity, in some part of the world, you have only the 2G. We are working about the 5G, but we have also taken into account that in the large developed countries, the connectivity and the ecosystem for digitalization is not exactly the same than in Singapore or even in Geneva.
Right. So, Isabelle, thank you so much for pressing this point, because, of course, when we think about the Port of Singapore, Rotterdam, Hong Kong, these are giant ports that you could say are well-resourced and, on the path to deal with these problems. But you wanted to emphasize repeatedly that there are developing countries, smaller ports. They are also part of the global supply chain, and they mustn't be forgotten. But I guess my question is, in terms of helping them, what is the most effective platform to really get something done for them?
We have a platform called Train for Trade, and we are working a lot also to train or co-train the port manager in the developing countries. For instance, we are using the port of Marseille for the French-speaking countries in Africa. We are using or working with Lisbon for the Portuguese African countries. and Dublin, working with a port from, of course, English origin or English speaking. And I think that this cooperation between middle port, because it's not Rotterdam or Singapore, it's middle port but important port, working with port in the developing country, trying to really exchange with the managers how many times a vessel can stay in the port. If the vessel is staying 1 month in the port, how you will have a port competitive? It's ridiculous. Never, even the SMEs are doing a lot in order to export. If there is so lost time permanently, it's of course a mess for the SMEs or the companies in the country. So it's related to trade as such. And working like that, I think that yes, we try to increase the level of knowledge, the level of experience, the level of exchange with other, taking into account that the resources are not exactly the same, and especially the financial resources. You know also that a lot of countries, big countries, for instance, China is working a lot with ports in Africa. Sometimes it's a real collaboration. Sometimes it could be a little bit different with really not a big attention to train the people, but more to have a part in the capital of the port or the private port. So that's something also which is very delicate in order to keep to the port authorities the capacity to really manage themselves and not to be managed by others. That's another issue that we try to elevate the level of knowledge and acknowledgement of the danger or the risks and the advantage to cooperate with others, which are the condition of a good cooperation between big countries and small developing countries. So yes, I think that something can be done, but they have also a lot of experience, different experience than Rotterdam and than Singapore, because they are working in condition that when you are, I visited some port in Africa, in small countries, frankly, it's another world, really another world. And we have to help them, but they are very creative. They are really willing. A lot of people are very good people. And I would like to highlight what Mr. Stoop said. The human capital is fantastic, but the resources and the capacity to work is not enough supported, but the human capital is fantastic in those ports.
Well, maybe we can move on to the question, whether you're talking about seafarers or digitalization or even sustainability. What are some of the concrete actions you would like to see going forward? I mean, you might say you want the IMO to be doing specific things, or you might want ports to do more, or where are some of the barriers and opportunities and specific actions? Maybe I can go to Hugo first in any of the areas that we've discussed.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think that Hoon highlights something that is very important, and that is the standardization. Because if every port is building its own platform, it's going to be a mess again. As systems will not always be able to talk to each other, and that is something that we are facing on a daily basis. I mean, we operate large ships, so we usually go to big ports. We have also some smaller ships, not that many, but we see the difference between a big, well-organized port and another one. But nevertheless, the systems is still paper-based. Things like, bill of lading, knowing that we have the blockchain technology, that is one of the first things that I would like seeing being digitalized, because there's also a financial risk attached to it. I mean, the bill of lading, in the old days, the master was signing the bill of lading saying, okay, I've loaded the cargo, and it was only on presenting that very same bill of lading on the other end of the world that you could ask the master to discharge the cargo. Nowadays, it's done with a letter of indemnity and you name it, and there is very little security around it. There's a high level of trust, and that is good. But quite frankly, if we had a better control, it would be far better and would be far more efficient. And the second thing that I would like to highlight is also the benefit for the climate, because if we are more efficient, if we don't stay in port for weeks and weeks because the port is inefficient, knowing that we have, unfortunately, also to use energy when we are in port, I think that we can save quite a lot of emissions, quite a lot of carbon emitted in the atmosphere. And so digitalization is also, or has also, a great potential to reduce the emissions of this industry, and that is one of the biggest challenges that we have. But I believe that it's totally achievable if we use the right tools.
Yes. Hoon, would you like to add?
For my side, I would say two to add on. I think first is really cool change. I think it would be good if different players can come together more often, share best practices, and come together to try to move the process forward. I mean, I know IO such as ICS, ITF, IMAC, IMO, we are all working together to try to see to move the process forward. There is risk, there is some concern, but how do we address it together? I think it is something which cannot be you against me type. It has to be worked together. So I'm really hoping that we can have more ports open up to conduct safe pool change. There are already guidelines out there. So how do we move it forward together? So that's for the immediate. I think that's the concern. Then next, I think for the long term, if I really want to know what's the future ship, how the future ship looks like, which fuel, what alternative fuel, and I think we need to really ramp up and accelerate our research in this area. A lot more industry pilots, proof of concept to see how to move forward for there, because if not, we are late to meet the target of 2050.
Right. Well, we do have a session, I think later on today, on decarbonization. And obviously that is designing new ships and considering using new fuels and batteries and so on. But without perhaps going into the technicalities of fuels and new ships, but staying with sustainability, are there any other perspective that you would like to bring up at this stage? Isabelle.
Yes, I think that well, it's short term, but it's more middle on long term. But long term is not so far. I think that the question of the value chain globally has also to taken into consideration. If the value chain are changing because a certain relocalization or different ways to travel, the size of the vessels, the capacity of the port to welcome the vessels, and trying to look at which are the new routes. They are the traditional route that you know, of course, very well. I think that it's important to anticipate what could happen, not especially in the post-COVID, because I'm not sure that the post-COVID will as such emerge, but because of climate change, because a lot of things will change in the world or are changing even before COVID. And of course, COVID accelerates and exacerbates all the trends. And it's why I think that looking at that is also important regarding decarbonization, but also digitalization and efficiency of the sector in order to really stay the important partner in distributing goods. And for instance, if we are changing in the regional port, something with distributed hubs or something like that in order to organize differently the logistic, I think that's something that we have also to have in mind in a perspective or maybe 10 years, but 10 years it's tomorrow, start today.
Right. I'd like to talk a little bit about also collaboration, because you've all touched on the importance of a certain group, like ports, for example, that they can get together and think about what improvements they can make. And then you can work across. So for example, ports and shipping companies, or ports, shipping companies and manufacturers, or with banks, right? So because there are all these people on the value chain, it does require a lot of time. I mean, it's easy for us to always talk about let's get together and work together. So for example, Hoon, I mean, obviously Singapore is already doing quite a lot by engaging with others. How do you think we can get more people to work with each other, but without anyone feeling that they're carrying a huge load? Because you've got to run a port, for example, but yet you want to work with your peers and others so that you can solve some of these problems down the line.
GMF is a very good platform where you actually bring in the players and stakeholders and get CEOs and founders to come up and curate solutions. What we found helpful in Singapore is that, for example, for decarbonization, we've set up an international advisory panel where we bring together the key stakeholders. I mean, there will be a need for discussions and talks, but the key is really what is the concrete solution, right, that we can bring on the table, and that the key players who are on the table talking are able to bring forward the solutions or bring forward the research. So for example, for decarbonization, it's not shipping alone. You have to bring together engine makers, shipyards, the ship owners, ship agent. You have to bring all these players together, class societies. You have to bring them together so that you can form ecosystems, right, of different along different fuel types, for example, and kickstart something going. So some countries, some companies are already doing it, but can we sort of like give it a greater nudge? So for example, hydrogen, we need one ecosystem. Ammonia, we need one ecosystem. Fuel cell, we need one ecosystem. LNG, we already have it, continue going as a transition fuel. So that ecosystem is formed. So we should build on such experiences. What in Port of Singapore, we are trying to kickstart as well is from the bunkering perspective. That actually we realized from the LNG experience that it takes about 5-6 years for LNG bunker standards to be put in place. So we initiated in 2007 and we got it done in 2014, something like that. So we need to get that kick-started. If it's a hydrogen bunker fuel or it is a ammonia, we need to just start doing something now to prepare, and it takes years. So we shouldn't just wait until last minute, oh, we have this fuel, therefore we need to do bunkering now. So these are some of the efforts we are thinking of. Yeah.
Hugo, do you have a perspective to share with us too?
Well, I mean, your question is very interesting because you said that the big players should not carry all the weight, and maybe I have a different perspective. I think that the big players should show leadership, and I think that there is always a benefit of being at the head of the train. And yes, indeed, GMF is enabling us to meet other big players, certainly across sectors, which is very interesting because then you don't have to cooperate with your direct competitor. But obviously, I don't compete carrying crude oil. I don't compete with the containers or the dry bulkers. And so there's a lot of things that we can do in common, which doesn't pose any competition problem. And I think that forums like the GMF, and there are others, but GMF is probably one of the better ones, enables people to cooperate. And I think we have showed that in the last 2 years. I mean, when you see the amount of banks that have gathered, that have grouped themselves to do the Poseidon Principle. Yesterday was the Sea Cargo Charter, where some of the leading chartering companies have got together in order to have a little bit the same as the Poseidon Principle, i.e. deploy a trajectory in terms of carbon emissions. I think those are all great examples of how we can cooperate. And by the way, all of that always comes down to where is the data and where can we get access to the data in a transparent way in a system that is compatible with other systems so that everybody can use it.
Right. I mean, at the Global Maritime Forum, we've drank the Kool-Aid of how to bring people together and discuss perspectives and then find solutions. And we've tried to reach people who are very senior in their companies and their industry sector because they are effectively the decision makers. But one of the things about bringing people together, providing a well-curated, well-convened platform for discussing, well, we're just talking about the maritime sector here, but also we have to blend in, right, with all the supply value that exceeds perhaps, even it's a multi-sectoral issue. And to do well-curated ongoing platform, right? Because Lei Hoon and you've all said it may take a few years to go from A to B. One of the problems is you do need resources to carry on, and you need, for an NGO like the Global Maritime Forum, we need to be able to partner up with somebody. I think purely on our own, it may be a bit difficult. We're very willing to take on the job. But, if the industry had a kind of timeline and framework to say, we need to go into these kinds of areas and we can see how we might share out the work, then I can see that GMF might, be a long-term player along with all of you to see a plan where we can contribute. Well, we're coming to the last kind of 15 minutes of our discussion. We have a number of questions here. I'll just pick, well, I've been picking up some of the questions. You have leaders in the industry, and you have leaders in ports and companies and so on, but they're always the laggards. How do we deal with the laggards, or do we just ignore them and carry on? Because some of the laggards can be major players.
Yeah, but I think that the future is pretty clear. I mean, we have major trends going on, and I think that a couple of years ago you still had the laggards who were voicing their opinion, saying we shouldn't change anything and carry on doing what we have always been doing. And even in my own company, we had people saying things like that. And quite frankly, I think that today. Certainly, as Isabelle said, the COVID-19 has been an accelerator of many of those trends, and people realize that the train has left, it has a certain speed, and it will not be stopped. And so I think that if there are still people who are doubting about the destination, I think we should, frankly speaking, ignore them. We should always be open to welcome them late on board the train. But if they really don't want to step in, I think that they will find it very, very difficult going forward, and they will disappear naturally.
Okay, so the laggards will disappear. Isabelle?
No, I agree, of course, that's a natural movement. Do we have to do something against the natural movement or not? That's really the question. Of course, people refusing totally the trend, nothing to do. But I think that maybe it's not a choice. Sometimes it's a resignation because there is no other possibility. So it's why, for instance, organizations like UNCTAD, we are working also with the smallest, or with those who are not so well equipped. And I think that yes, sometimes the leapfrogging is possible. And it's what we try to really highlight and try to really stimulate this leapfrogging. Do some steps, go a little bit further, and that's something which is not always, but sometimes possible in order to jump in the train, because it's true that the trend is a trend, and it's impossible to stop the train. But I think that if we can help the smalls to join, it's really something that's important. It's the same with the value chain. When you look at the biggest value chain, very long or hyper concentrated, I think that we can change that, and we can try to reduce the risks for all the players. Otherwise, only the biggest one will have the benefit. And I think that it's important that that kind of diversity between the players in the chain is also good for all the chain. And that's something that we have to think about and to work on.
Right. Hoon?
I share the same views as Hugo and Isabelle. I think the first is really we shouldn't see them as laggards. In fact, different stakeholders or players have different agenda, right? The question is, how do you create an agenda that is win-win, so that they also see the values of coming in? So you can do it in two ways. One is you must reduce the barrier for them. Reduce the barrier for them to come onto platforms, reduce the barrier for them to learn, reduce the barrier for them to be able to come on board at ease. Second, really, is you just have to create a momentum, like what Isabelle and Hugo said. Just make sure the train moves faster and faster and faster, and they realize if you are not catching up with the train, you will no longer be able to be on the train. So whoever is fast enough, go on, move faster, as fast as we can. Whoever are still trying to catch up, we have to make sure that there are enough facilities to bring them on board. So I would say this will be the two key aspects that we have to all work on. The key is to snowball. Just keep the initiative snowballing and create a momentum.
Great. Well, we have a few minutes, and one of the issues that Hoon, you brought up that we haven't pressed on yet is talent. I know we talked about seafarers and the particular problems of crew changes at this stage, but in terms of talent, I mean, one of the things that I keep hearing about is the lack of talent going into the shipping sector. So, for example, we want talent for people to be seafarers. Sometimes people say, well, they don't find it very attractive to work in a shipping company, or they don't find it very attractive to work in a port. So I'd just like to hear your perspective on the future of how do we make the maritime sector really sexy and attractive, because I think it is. There are many aspects of it that maybe, ordinary young people, they might see it as an old, tired, boring industry, but no, actually it isn't. So Hugo, would you like to go first?
Well, I certainly don't think that shipping is not sexy or not attractive. And as a matter of fact, we are vertically integrated, which means that we do our own ship management, and the people are working on board the ships of Euronav are not just remote workers provided by a supplier. What this crisis has I would say demonstrates is that we need to get closer to those guys. I must admit that in our company, and I know it's the fact at many other companies, there was a little bit of a divide between the people working in the office and the people working on board. And because I was very worried about the mental health of those people as they were stranded and they were getting a little bit desperate, I decided to do a series of videos. I sent many more messages, and I started to communicate with a lot of them, as a matter of fact. And I realized that they're very, very good people, even better than what I thought. They have plenty of ideas. And I think that we have not listened to them enough. And as a matter of fact, they are the best ambassadors that we can find out there. If I go, in a school, seafarer school, officer school, then I start speaking about, the industry and all the rest of it. People may not always believe what I'm saying because I want to promote something. I think that when it comes from the people who have had this experience and they speak from the heart, then it's very, very moving. And of course, not everyone can be a seafarer, and I think it's a choice in life. And some people love it, and when they retire, they regret it because they're really missing the sea. And some others maybe are not were not born to be seafarers. That's fine. You always need to find what excites you in life. But I think that the shipping one more time is probably enjoying a reputation that is not deserved. And I just believe that we need to come out, be transparent about it, speak a lot more about the benefits of this industry, and transforming, I would say, unknown people into the hero of tomorrow.
Yes. Lei Hoon?
I think shipping is seen as the backbone, right? Of all Hugo mentioned, more than 90% of the goods are transported by ships. So we need to move from the backbones to the forefront. I think primarily also because it is a B2B business, whereas B2C is much easier. You actually can see the product coming to you. Whereas B2B tends to be something which is a bit more less visible and maybe forgotten by the general population. Having said that, actually this COVID, it presents a very good opportunity for us. We see sectors who are not able to be commercially viable. This includes aviation, tourism, which suffers because they're B2C, but we are still being resilient. So what we are trying to do here in Singapore is to go on two tracks. First is we really want to do a campaign out there to sort of like sustain campaign to tell them how the sector has been transforming, what are the new talent areas that we need. So whether it's cybersecurity, data analytics, whether it is in the area of logistics chain, even going green. We need new engineers who are familiar with green tech. So green tech, marine tech, I think we have to go out to tell them what changes we are going through in the industry and tell our population that we welcome you to come and join us. Make Maritime your port of call. So that is one track we are going. Secondly, we are taking this opportunity to sort of like fund training, exposure, traineeship, for them to come and have a stint in the industry, whether it is 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. There are many who are out of job anyway. So we get them to do a stint, government funded, do a stint in the companies. And for all after 4 or 5 months, then they realize actually shipping is my port of call. So we realized that actually the attraction part is a hurdle because they don't know shipping or they don't know maritime well. But once they join the sector, our statistics show that they are well paid. They're actually better paid than some other sectors, and that actually they do stay on. So this is our hope, our dream, our ambition. This is the opportunity we have now in this COVID situation. We must see it and move fast before other sectors catch up and start booming again.
Right. Well, I can see that. There's a lot of promotion that we can all be doing to convince young people that this is, this is a worthwhile career for them, and there are many jobs in the maritime sector. Isabelle, is there anything that we've left out today? Because we have another 4 or 5 minutes. Anything that you would like to end with?
just to say that maybe climate change and green perspective will attract also new people. I think that it's something living strongly for the young people, and I think that it's a way, and I will not repeat, you know very well, very better than me, the sector and the capacity to attract the people. I would like to highlight one aspect which is for me important. It's the international cooperation. We need, and we know all IMO, we know the big organizations, sometimes we perceive that it's a little bit slow, that it's difficult to find an agreement, that it's a little bit, well, it's not so dynamic as the private sector. It's true. It's true, nevertheless, we have to really show the example. And in those organizations, showing that the sector as such is moving and helping sometimes government representing in the IMO to realize that the sector itself is moving quickly and is moving faster than sometimes the ambition of a government everywhere in the world. It's not a critique to the government as such, but it's really the process. And the process is difficult, especially in the trade war or trade escalation that we know between China, US, etc. today. So I think that keeping in mind that we have to really show smartly to the governments that they can move in the IMO with ambition, which are a little bit more more ambitious. That's something that we have to have in mind, even in the private sector. We are on the same, not on the same boat, but we are really on the same path. And sometimes the private sector has to push the national authorities in order that they could move in the international organization. I know organizing a conference with 192 member states, it's not easy. But for many, many reasons, you can understand that very well. So it's why they need some time a little push from the external world in order to show the way. So I'm sure that also in the maritime sector, it could be the case.
Maybe I'll just ask one very, very brief question, because sometimes, I mean, obviously the IMO is particularly important for our sector, but some people say the IMO is relatively narrow in its terms of reference. And traditionally, the IMO has looked at very technical issues. But today, when we're talking about pollution, changing ships, decarbonization, new fuels, and all of those areas, these are multidisciplinary, science, engineering driven issues that are also policy oriented. And then, of course, you need to finance this transformation. Is there some way where we can think about IMO together with other UN agencies or perhaps other agencies together to actually get it done? Very quick answers from any of you. Maybe Isabelle.
Yeah, it's absolutely key. And I think that IMO is the mirror of the transport sector, narrow, technical, etc. It's not the case. Transport globally, and especially the maritime transport, is related to all the other fields. So I agree. And I try on my side really to cooperate and to organize a link, not only MOU, but really concrete relationship between the different organizations. We have to modernize IMO, modernize in the sense to extend and to enlarge. In my organization, development is key. So development is so great, sometimes too bright. But for IMO, yes, we have to do that. And I fully agree. We do our best in try to work with them regularly in order to show them the other fields than only the technical things.
Right. Any final 30 seconds comment from Hoon or Hugo? Hoon, any final comments from you?
I'm good. I just want to say that it has been quite a very interesting discussion, and any ideas that comes out, we definitely want to see it and work with any partners who are willing to test bait anything. Just come to Singapore.
Fantastic. Hugo, last word, 15 seconds.
Thank you very much to all. Very interesting panel. I think that GMF is about planting seeds, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, well, it's my pleasure. I'm going to hand back to Johanna, who will round off our panel discussion. Johanna, are you there?
Yes, I am.
There you are.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you. It took me a moment to just get back on camera. Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you, Isabelle, Hoon, and Hugo for an enlightening discussion. That was fantastic. Next up, we have a session on the global energy transition that takes place at noon UTC. It's going to be a really great panel with experts from both the energy sector, from academia, from shipping as well, a whole range of different stakeholders that will be offering their perspectives on the global energy transition and the role of shipping specifically in that global energy transition. And later on today, we have a panel on the economic and geopolitical impacts of COVID-19. We hope that you all will be able to join us there. And then, of course, there's also our closing plenary, which takes place on Wednesday. So we look forward to seeing you all there too. In the meantime, though, one last element that we would ask from you is after each session, we ask everyone to post the one item or one point idea that they, for how we might take action next. Please put that in the Zoom chat comments. We will leave the session open for a few more minutes as you do so. The question specifically is, based on this conversation, please share with us one idea for what we should do next to turn this conversation into action. Thank you everyone for joining us and look forward to reconnecting soon.